Good evening to you, and thanks so much for joining Africa News Network First Fast Live. This is the Friday edition of ANN7 Prime. My name is Cindy Babi. ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa says President Jacob Zuma is anxious about leaving office, and this comes amid rife speculation about Zuma's recall. Ramaphosa, who's at the World Economic Forum in Davos, told a BBC in an interview that it's only human for President Zuma to be anxious and concerned about his future. Ramaphosa adds that Zuma wants the leadership transition to be handled carefully, and there have been growing calls for Zuma's recall after the election of the ANC's new leadership. And ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa says constitutionally Zuma has another 18 months to serve as head of state. Ramaphosa is in talks with Zuma on whether he will serve out his term. And in the latest interview, raises questions about Zuma's recall being a foregone conclusion with only the date outstanding. And here's what Ramaphosa says in the BBC interview. He says, and I quote, "Everyone wants to see the tenure that President Jacob Zuma still has to serve out addressed, and Zuma still has 18 months, and within this time a lot can happen. And we have agreed to meet regularly to discuss how long the transition will last, and any normal human being would obviously be anxious, concerned about all this, and he's naturally feeling anxious, and he wants the matter to be handled carefully," end quote.
So that everyone wants to see addressed is the tenure that President Zuma still has to serve out. Constitutionally speaking, he still has 18 months. And within this 18 months, obviously, a lot of things can happen. But he and I have agreed that we are going to be meeting regularly to discuss matters, but it dictates, and by definition, it means that in the course of this, we're also going to discuss the transition. How long is it going to last?
How is he feeling? Is he under pressure? Is he feeling very anxious? He must be, with all this stuff swirling around him.
Well, obviously. I mean, any normal human being would be anxious, would be concerned about all this. So he is naturally feeling anxious, and he wants matters to be handled in a way that they will be handled carefully. And I'm saying my key interest is to move the country forward. It's not so much about what happens to an individual.
Well, let's not beat about the bush. The president or the head of state term as the ANC president has come to an end. And he has also indicated that when he did that, he was willing to move on so that we have a new person. The next step is about management of a transition. The ANC has never had to deal with this in this manner. And the last time they had was a removal of a president who was at odds with the ANC. This is why the ANC's position this time is to say this matter must be handled delicately, and there must be a coordination between the office of the ANC president and the head of state in trying to manage that transition. So we should not be alarmed that these discussions are taking place.
As always, the lines are open 0112035120. That's 0112035120. Joining us in studio, Kim Heller, political analyst, and Rep Bilitso Tetsi, political commentator. Good evening to both of you. Thanks so much for joining us. And the time being near is that the writing on the wall that indeed President Jacob Zuma, once he's no longer ANC president, his support and power has now shrunk and dwindled to the point that it justifies his recall. He has no uses anymore, notwithstanding the controversy around him, of course. Kim?
Well, President Zuma will be going according to his constitution, according to his term, which ends constitutionally in 18 months' time. Whether he goes before that is still a question that's opened. And I think when he goes, and I think that's going to be in 18 months' time, he's leaving behind a legacy of accelerated RET, land return and free education. And I think that's going to be a great asset to the new president, which may or may not be Cyril Ramaphosa, in terms of securing a very successful and positive margin of victory for the ANC, because those are the foundations that the electorate is interested in. And I think, if I can steal a term from McDonald's itself, I think there's been a supersizing of the Zuma must go narrative. And I'm quite surprised because it's an antithesis of the unity that was forged by the ANC as expressed in December, as well as in the recent NEC. So whilst the mainstream media was trading on a narrative about everybody asking for Zuma to go, that was not the majority voice. And one has to question that in the confines of Davos, under the auspices of the white praise, what kind of dialogue is being traded? And is that in the interests of the country and in the ANC? And
yeah,
I'm
but
not
you
sure
also can't ignore the internal narrative that Zuma must go. We saw with former Deputy President of the Youth League, Ronald Lamola, also calling for Zuma as recent as the NEC meeting, while the Secretary General was saying that was not necessarily an agenda point. So this confusion would fuel the speculation that we're seeing. But it is a very delicate time for the party.
Well, if I can just add to my previous narrative, I think that is a small voice. And in fact, whilst the headlines were alight with NEC has asked Zuma to leave, and Zuma is leaving and he has been recalled, that was not the truth. So what really happened at that NEC meeting was that was spearheaded by 2 individuals and supported by less than 6 individuals. So that is not the predominant narrative. The predominant narrative in the ANC is for a recall of poverty, inequality and landlessness. And that was clearly articulated in December. And to date, the president of the ANC, Cyril Ramaphosa, has eloquently expressed those sentiments. And I hope that he's not abandoning that script, because that is the script of the ANC. And what is going to see the ANC through this difficult transition period is a focus on policies, not a focus on demonizing the individual who actually has laid the foundations for RET in this nation.
Yeah, so you're saying that if Zuma were to be recalled, it would be in response or at the behest of his critics and the press, Commissar, in the sense that the party needs to decide what is best for the ANC and the country going forward, and not to succumb to the pressure of recalling Zuma?
Yeah, I would say the damage was done. And, to the society, what the media shows in the screen, it goes a long way to the people who are not in parliament, to the ordinary people who are not even at the local level. That information will come throughout the media. To them is the truth. You see, hence I'm saying that the damage is done by the media. And you look at the media in terms of ownership. The media, something like 90% or 98%, was only 2% which I'm referring to N7. We are representing 2% of the 100% we are having. So the whole 98% is still more biased to the old system of apartheid. So it's very difficult for them to change. Yeah.
But it's not that President Zuma himself is an angel. I mean, we see now that there is praise for ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa that he's cleaning up. We've seen the action now around law enforcement with the NPA and the raids at the Estina farm. We've seen the SOEs and executives falling on their swords. That the next item would be then to recall President Jacob Zuma, just based on the litany of issues that he's had.
Yeah, well, my concern there is that whatever people are saying, if you are getting somebody saying something about somebody, you take that as the truth. That is too much subjectivity in this case of the president. There's no prima facie evidence which you can say, yes, here is it, here is it. Look, the first thing, look at Gogo, how Gogo presented the story of Gupta. How did it Gupta came that Gupta must own something at the ESCOM level. You listen how he came in because that particular company was available in the market for anybody who can bid for it. So somebody came and bid for it.
And I think that's the difficulty that the Commissioner of Inquiry on State Capture will have to prove if the likes of former Deputy Finance Minister Mcebisi Jonas is not able to substantiate, to say there was an offer of a ministerial position, but it was just a conversation and not necessarily something that has been documented.
Yeah, the degree of subjectivity there, it leaves much to be desired. Let me put it that way. Because we don't live like that as South Africans. The scientific proof, you need to have some concrete evidence for you to say to me, I've done 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, well, Commissar, some believe that he won't even live to see the day, at least in office, before the State of the Nation address, literally counting days. We're not sure whether it would be after or before, a week, a day before President Jacob Zuma is recalled. Kim, you seem to think otherwise.
I do think otherwise, and I think we'll see the President delivering his State of the Nation confidently, and he will be focusing on key policies that he has put at the fore of the ANC agenda, and which should be the driving force of the agenda of the ANC's agenda moving forward. And I don't think it's in the benefit of the ANC at all to recall him. Accountability is one thing, but that must be settled by the courts. And as I've said in previous interviews, he has shown a total acceptance and willingness to cooperate with any inquiry on state capture, including himself and other persons, or what he describes as culprits who must fall within the ambit of the law. But we are judging him on the back of half-truths and allegations. I wrote a column today which said we have this principle of finding him guilty before we give him a chance to be innocent. And I think my question to the ANC NEC is, on what basis is the president of this country, or the president of, in fact, one of their deployees, he is a deployee of the ANC, on what basis is he being recalled? Because he has not contravened anything on the ANC constitution. Neither, in my view, has he contributed anything on the constitution of the country.
According to the Constitutional Court, of course, on the Ngandla matter, failing to uphold the constitution and also being personally held liable for a portion of the renovations to his homestead. So, we can go back, and there's a whole list of things. But, Commissar, what I want to clear up is that the detail, or the devil is in the detail. Cyril Ramaphosa says they have been having continuous discussions, and Zuma is anxious, and he wants this matter to be handled delicately. So clearly there is some form of a, not transfer of power as it were, but a handover, if you will.
Yeah, I think Zuma is not just a simple leader. Let's take note of that. So his exit, it needs to be a dignified exit. To me, that's my understanding. That is why even we had the president of the ANC, when he spoke that, please, I want everybody must be treated accordingly. He must be respected, his dignity. It's very important. But hence I'm saying that it does not mean that because of these allegations, which they are right in the media, and some of these allegations tend to become the truth. You heard the leader at Parliament when he said, after Koko, the first time when he went for an interview at Parliament, he was told that he's going to object to that particular testimony. So the second time when he was presenting, because he was presenting with document, there was prima facie evidence put to them. That is why even the advocate, he didn't have much power to attack Koko, because, he gives you, let's read this page, let's read. To me, now I take that from there. I said, at what angle do they say the president, he connived with the Guptas? Now, I say again, but we are encouraging that as blacks in general, and what are blacks? Let's look at it. What are blacks? Blacks is Chinese, Indians, Africans, which is another group which can fall under the Asian people. Asian Tigers, they all fall under blacks in South Africa. Now, I think if they want to play politics, let them play politics nicely. The problem here is not about Zuma. It's about a stance which Zuma has taken. Here, Zuma was more leaning to the left, to the left of or of the East rather than the West. Do you understand? So that stand, it speaks to the negotiations, the CODESA negotiations, because CODESA...
Yes, but, and I hear you, I understand the historical background, but currently what we're seeing with the incumbent ANC president is that state-owned entities have essentially been eroded by the proximity of Jacob Zuma to the Guptas and, this whole matter around McKinsey and Trillion, the reversal thereof. It's all completely bizarre. But the center of it all, it's like Zuma has been the magnet thereof, and even within the ANC structures, to say corruption has quadrupled, if you will, since President Jacob Zuma's tenure, at least in the last 5 years.
Look, I would put, there are 2 points here. Look, when we're in an organization or a local municipality, this is what we call political arm. This is what we call administrative arm. You see, politicians, they are there to make laws. After making the laws and taking resolutions, policies, and they present those things to the officials to execute. Then after, what they do, they don't interfere in administration. They do what we call side.
Well, you could also argue that as the executive, he would deploy people that are pliable, that would essentially take direction from President Zuma, as we've seen the narrative play out in the public discourse.
Who is the captain of the ship?
You know, the Msebenzi Zwane being implicated in the agricultural issue in the Free State, and that Ace Magashule was then premier, somehow facilitated this particular thing. But I don't want to get into the detail. I want to look at what is the consequences or the comeuppance. That is it time for Zuma now to be punished, as it were?
Yeah, I find this narrative of an association of President Zuma with corruption very problematic and very incomplete. If he's guilty of any acts of corruption, he must be found guilty and tried accordingly. But we have a trial in the media which is very rabid and very unfair. And if we are equating state capture and corruption with one man and one family, whilst the lion's share of the land in this country and the lion's share of contracts for SOEs sits firmly in the hands of whites, then we are doing a great disservice to this country, and we are not looking at a just and free society ever in the future. And I think it's time for the ANC to move on to politics of policies. Policies have always won ANC a commanding lead in elections, and that's what's going to win the election for the ANC in 2019. So this victimization of an individual and the glorification of others must stop. And the sanction that we give to white capital, who are at the very heart of state capture and corruption in this country, must stop. Otherwise, we're talking of a fable in this country around theft and corruption, as if it belongs to one individual. And I think there's an anti-black thrust to this whole storytelling, because it's as if since the ANC government has come into power, and especially Jacob Zuma, that corruption has started. When if we look at Eskom alone, I think 80%, if not more, of those contracts lie in white hands on very, very long contracts. So we must be very honest about how we confront the issue of corruption.
Yeah, but how would you interpret Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba now asking the energy generation executive to resign in the interest of patriotism, suggesting therefore that the likes of your Brian Molefe, Koko, who've all been implicated, of course, in the State of Capture report, that their removal will then enable a renewal or some form of a clean-up within state-owned entities, if that is not true.
If I can respond to that, I think we're doing ourselves, once again, a greater service if we're finding easy scapegoats in these people. I mean, I would regard Brian Molefe as a hero in terms of what he did for transformation at Eskom. And you just have to speak to black staff there in terms of the true transformation that he tried to generate. If you listen to what Koko said, he spoke to black empowerment in a way that is really critical. And people are trying to snuff those voices out, and we need to ask why. I think we are very lazy in terms of asking the right questions and looking for the right answers, and therefore we trap ourselves. So perhaps we are never a liberated society economically in this country. We must take the blame for that, because we are serving an agenda that is not black empowered, and it's anti-ANC, and the ANC should see this. It's allowing its narrative once again to be set by external forces, and I'm very disappointed at the kind of emboldenment of this white narrative at Davos. The ANC must show that it's a party of the people, and the biggest task of Ramaphosa and his team is to focus on putting the black child first, and that is their focus.
Can they pull all of that? And I understand that as a collective, you are likely to achieve more, but within the ANC itself, not even the factions necessarily, the combined slate creating its own complexities because of the different ideologies, Commissar, that it is not just a magic wand that this unity is going to create within the party. There is levels of dissent that we've seen. We've seen even anti-Zuma supporters that are still in the NEC. So ultimately, the decision would have to be made as to what the timing is of President Jacob Zuma. We had from sources that this is imminent, that he's going to go.
Yeah, I want to put it clear that people must understand that while the ANC was approaching the conference, the members of the African National Congress in that era, they exercised their democratic right by getting the right warm body who will drive the ANC for the coming 5 years. It was not to say that we are fighting each other or one another. But what the crises are happening now, other media, they continue to say this one was not part of CR, was part of NDZ. Beyond the conference, you don't speak that language. I think they must stop it, because it does not build the ANC. It actually separates the ANC. We don't work that way. Once we have elected the leaders, what we normally do, we rally around those leaders who are elected by the party.
Yeah, very briefly, Kim, we're out of time. What we saw also the ANC Women's League saying they will support whichever direction the NEC will take, including President Cyril Ramaphosa of the ANC. For me, that also rings true that they are supporting a recall of Zuma. I could be misreading it.
I think we must look back to the conference for a moment. And the conference was a vote of support for RET and accelerated RET. And the collective leadership of the ANC must deliver that, whatever that takes. There was not a call for the recall. And I think people are going to be very surprised at the support for President Zuma in the streets rather than in the mainstream media. And I think there's going to be a lot of opposition to his removal.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Thanks as always. Enjoy your weekend. And thanks for your time. It's Kim Heller, political analyst, and Belizo Tetsi, political commentator. Of course, you can catch Kim Heller's articles on our sister publication, The New Age. We take a quick break and we'll see you shortly.